and welcome back to Atypical Talk. This is a podcast where we have conversations that illuminate the intersection of faith, culture, and the common spaces of our humanity. I'm Abby.
I'm Joel.
I'm Brooke.
And we are back for another season of Atypical Talk. We've taken a little bit of a break. We're in a new space.
We've been doing nothing. We've just been chilling and not doing any other work at all. Yep. But we're in a new space, and we have Brooke back with us, who joined us back at the end of May. She's just made her way back from maternity leave, and we threw her to the wolves, and we're like, you're on the pod.
Yeah, I genuinely have been doing nothing for the last, but taking care of babies.
That's not enough.
That's a lot of stuff.
Yeah, so great to have you, Brooke. Brooke is our awesome children's pastor at the church, and so we're glad to have her in the conversation today.
Yeah. Thank you. So our opening question today is, what is your go-to Starbucks order? We're going to be talking a little bit about cafes later. That's the whole reasoning behind that.
Oh, man. I am really boring. I during the hot times, I get an iced latte with a quad shot of espresso, so it has a lot more coffee taste than milk and no sweetener. And when it is cold outside, as the season's starting to turn, I get a hot latte with a quad shot of espresso. So coffee forward. I like the taste of coffee, and I try to save my sugar for other times in the day if I do that, but that's just me.
Yeah.
I like the taste of no coffee, but with the effect of coffee. Oh, yeah. So I like to change it up a little bit. So sometimes I'm like a caramel iced coffee girl with maybe a little extra sweet cream. Today it was pumpkin iced mocha, I think, but triple espresso. I don't know. I usually just order what somebody else has ordered.
That's an adventure every time you go up to the counter or the drive-thru, right?
Oh, I always do it online because I'm always so stressed to order in person.
Yep.
I don't want them to hate me. So yeah. But always iced coffee for me if I'm going to Starbucks. Even if it's negative 10 degrees outside, I'm an iced coffee
Never
girly.
do hot coffee. Interesting.
Very rare. Yeah. I will at home if I ever am without the kids and can have a slow morning with a coffee cup.
Yeah.
Abby, we know that you are the biggest coffee fan, and you love the bean drink. So tell us, what's your Starbucks order?
I do not like coffee at all.
It's the worst thing about Abby. It's by far the worst thing about Abby.
I usually get a frozen strawberry lemonade with extra strawberry. It is amazing. I only ever get it in the summer because I don't think they even make it in the winter. I don't know. But yeah. It's great.
I vowed that when Abby started working with us, I'm like, oh, you're going to like coffee by the end of this. And I've just failed miserably. I keep trying, and it's just a failure. But we're trying still.
I get my caffeine through Dr. Pepper, and that's about it. So our first article today, it's an LA Times article titled, "Modern Death Cafes Are Very Much Alive in LA Inside the Radical Movement." There are over 18,000 death cafes in the world.
Dun, dun, dun.
But what is a death cafe? When people come, they're given the instruction to have tea and cake and talk about death. People who come are there for various reasons: having just lost a loved one, caring for someone who's expected to pass soon, people scared of their own mortality, and many others. No matter the reason, everyone seems to be seeking some form of comfort, connection, and community. The first death cafe was founded in 2011 by John Underwood, and the movement is still going strong. It's not a support group, it's not a grief group, one cafe owner says. My whole thing is to get people talking about death so they're not afraid when the time comes. So why do you think these cafes are so popular? I mean, I've never heard of one around here. I need to do my research to see if there is even one, but most of them that they were talking about were around LA and Southern California area. But why do you think they're so popular?
I was fascinated by just the headline. I'm like, what is a death cafe? Yeah. Like, is this like some kind of weird thing where you go to die? Or, I mean, I didn't even know what it was at all. So reading about it, it really was fascinating to me just because it's really trying to connect with lonely people or people that are going towards something that we're all going towards and not shying away from it, but talking about this experience that we all have in our loved ones and then we all experience at some point for ourselves. So I was struck by it because I think it spoke to the loneliness of our culture and people not having social constructs and friendships where they can have those types of conversations. And then I was kind of sad just around the reality of like how popular they were. And I'm like, man, why aren't people going to churches to talk about these ultimate things? Why do they feel like church is not a safe place to talk about aging parents, to talk about loved ones that had passed away? And because I just feel like that's something that the people of God should be the safest place and the safest type of community on planet Earth to have these conversations about death. And so I think they're popular because it's something we're all going to face, and it's something that is coming for all of us, and we all experience it with our grandparents or aging parents and all those different realities. But it blew me away to consider like, oh man, what a miss that people aren't thinking about churches when they think about these things, because people are lonely, they're disconnected, and we all need each other to talk about these ultimate things. So yeah, it blew me away and made me sad, but also in a strange way, it makes me hopeful that people are thinking about the ultimate things. Like it's not like church leaders and people inside of faith communities, we need to like convince people to think about things beyond life. People already are. Just we need to meet them there and guide them and walk with them through the scary, through the hard, through the grief, whatever it might look like, because our culture is still asking about these things that are beyond what we can see and feel, which is a great starting point in any conversation.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, do you really think it's healthy to be discussing death? Like, I don't know. As Christians, we talk about it as almost, we're going to be going off to this wonderful place where everything's perfect. But I mean, it's also, I feel like a lot of fear surrounding death. So I don't know if it's healthy to sit around tables discussing it in these types of settings.
Yeah, I that's a really interesting pushback, because I think if it was the only thing, then yes. And that's, that's one of my calling cards at the church too, is like, we're not just focusing about where we go, where we die. Like that's not the whole thrust of the story, but it is part of the story. And if people are on their own and as they're asking these questions, they do need a safe place to be there. Not to think that that's the only part of the conversation, but it does need to be a part of the conversation. And if I can critique just myself, and probably if I can critique millennials in our generation, like, I don't know if we talk about death enough sometimes, not from a scary place, but from a like ultimate kind of place. And like that there is something that we're all going to experience when we breathe our last breath. And so I think there can be an overemphasis, which definitely at our church, in our community, we're not going to overemphasize death in a scary way. But there can be an underemphasis too, where people don't feel like it's safe to even ever broach those conversations. So like Halloween, and you can like have the conversations and you can like do the thing, but it's not like every day is Halloween. I mean, it doesn't have to all be the scary thing, but we do need to have safe places for people to think about the ultimate things. Because I think these death cafes are scratching an itch that people have of understanding and walking through the unknown. I mean, I remember for me, I lost my dad and all 4 of my grandparents in like 5 years. So it was like every 6 months it was like, oh man, here comes another one. And I honestly, like, it was just so face to face with the ultimate and grief and loss that I don't think I really had the tools or the community at the time to really process it. And so I think, yes, it can be healthy to have a place to do it. Do I want to be spending every Monday through Friday at the Death Cafe?
Right.
No, that could actually lead to some weird overemphasis in that way as well. But what did you think, Brooke, when you heard about these places?
I just thought it was really interesting. I also had not heard of this, but I think it's kind of neat that people would have a place to go that maybe would be outside of if they're grieving, the death of loved ones around them. Maybe they feel like this is a safe place they can go outside of their own family, even to just discuss with people who might be going through the same things. And I think too, I side with you, Joel. Like, I think it can be healthy, but could quickly be unhealthy.
There's a balance to it.
Exactly. Right? Yeah. I don't think it's something I would want to be focusing on,
Tuesdays at 7 at the Death Cafe.
Yeah. But I think there is a specific like time and place for that in life. So
and again, I think that these places are just filling a void from our faith communities. Like inside of our communities or people that are around our tables, if they don't have a safe place and if they don't feel like the door's open for them to ask those questions there, of course they're going to be searching and seeking for a safe place to have these conversations.
100%.
So I think the onus is on Jesus people to not overemphasize it, but know that, hey, we can talk about the scary things, the hard things, the grief, the loss, the lamenting that goes on inside of our faith community and in our friendships around our tables.
Yeah.
Because if not, they're going to be seeking out some tea and cake and a side of death.
Yeah.
And we should be filling that void for them. Yeah.
Yep. Our next topic today is an NPR article titled, "This Boss Vowed to Help His Workers with Childcare. It Hasn't Been Easy." It was during the height of the pandemic that Sachin Shivaram realized the depth of his employees' struggles with childcare. The CEO of the 115-year-old Wisconsin aluminum foundry was dealing with rising absenteeism as childcare centers closed and workers' other arrangements fell through. To help parents with childcare needs, Shivaram first tried to build a new childcare center nearby. He soon realized that the cost he would have to charge people to use the new center would be much too high compared to the median income in the community. He decided to give each employee $400 a month to put toward childcare costs. He originally wanted to earmark the money for licensed childcare facilities, but then discovered many of his workers could not find spots. So for now, he's reimbursing any childcare expense, even to pay grandma. Approximately 100 of the foundry's employees currently use the childcare benefit. So what do you guys think of this story? I thought it was a nice little feel-good. I mean, you don't see this very often.
Yeah. I loved this guy's heart that I heard him from, like, throughout the whole article. I have now 2 kids, and I'm really fortunate to have my sister-in-law caring for my kids, but we do pay her, and even that is equating to like $800 to $1,000 a month. And so like that is a big chunk coming out of our paychecks every month. Yeah. And so I just thought this was really interesting and a good way for this boss to be meeting his employees where they're at and just giving an extra way of showing that he cares and values not just the employee, but also their families, including their children. And I just think that's something that is lacking, at least in America today. And so, yeah, I loved the article, and I really thought it was really a great thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm really, that kind of leadership was really impressive to like think beyond just like the CEO level of things and to consider what's going on with absenteeism and the quality of life for families. And then, I mean, he ran into multiple roadblocks, but still was trying to figure out a way to make that burden less. Yeah. And, you know, like Brooke, we have 3 kids, and childcare is literally the second most expensive thing on our family budget. It literally is like giving to Bridgeway, and then our mortgage, and then childcare is literally like it's at the very top, and then it's like food after that. Yeah. So it's like it's just crazy how much of the pie it takes, and it should be quality care. So you want to honor the people that are doing it 100%. And all that kind of stuff. And we even have family that does a day or two throughout the week as well. So it's such a challenge. And you're right, Brooke. It just seems like in our country, at least, it's not something that is valued from like the employer standpoint to the employee. And there are a lot of Western countries where it's there are huge credits and there are huge opportunities and basically free places that you could bring your kids and have them cared for. But I love this guy's heart to consider what in the world is going on with the people that are working with him and for him and way under him to try to fix it. But it is a problem that is really messy. And it's not getting easier. And because there are people all the time that make the decision not to work, but to stay home because so much of one of the paychecks is going to go to childcare. Yeah. It's just such a challenge. But I think the heart of this story for me is seeing somebody who sees the challenge that families are facing and feels what they're facing, tries to do something about it. It doesn't work. He doesn't just throw his hands up. He goes to the next thing and asks more questions about the root realities. And so I think this is the type of company that people are going to want to work for and want to be a part of. And it'd be great for more and more, CEO level leaders to be thinking about these things, because ultimately you're going to have healthier, happier employees and healthier people and less everything because of this. We just need to start seeing it more as an investment instead of a expense, but it's an investment in the workforce and in our societies. So I love the story.
Yeah. And like in the article, it didn't mention that he had kids or anything like that. And so it wasn't necessarily just something where he's thinking about how can I make this easier for me? It was, how can I,
others focused for sure.
And so I really love that part about it. Do you think we could see more companies in the U.S. doing this?
1,000% we could.
Yeah.
But their profits are going to change.
Yeah, yeah.
Like that's just the reality is like, like you remember like maybe 4 or 5 years ago when the whole conversation about paying fast food workers more was like, well, we can't afford this. We can't do this. Well, now it's pretty average for fast food workers to be making $15 an hour, right? And the reality is that like the business changed, but it can be done. Like there's probably less profits at the top. Things cost more. And that's part of the inflation conversation. But like, yes, it can be done. It just needs to be the value of understanding like the CEOs and the bigwigs aren't going to make as much. And some of that cost is going to be passed on to the consumer because it's got to go somewhere. Yeah. But yes, it can be done. It's just people are going to have to make the hard choice to like not make as much money. Like some of the top not to make as much money. And for us all to burden share and pay more for our cheeseburgers and things like that none of us like. But understanding that like if people are going to make more money, they have to do this. And if you're going to give money to employees for childcare, that money's got to come somewhere. So so I totally think it's possible.
Yeah.
I think it's really hard in our American capitalistic society where everything's about the stock price and reporting to our earners and like you have to make more this quarter than we did last quarter or it looks like a failure. That's where it's hard. It can be done. It's going to have to take a different mindset. And it kind of does push against the American mindset of it has to be up and to the right every quarter more. It needs to grow. The bottom line needs to grow. And that's what's hard. I would love to see it become more of a norm. It's interesting here in Kokomo, Chrysler or Stellantis, they were bought by, I believe it's a French, is Stellantis a French company?
Italian, I believe.
Italian. I sound so ignorant. Italian company, but it's interesting. They moved in the direction to where they have a very generous paternity leave to where you can get, I think it's 3 months completely paid for awesome. Even dads. Yep. And so I think you see some of that Western European influence in some of the big companies. Sure. And as you see it work and people use it, I think that it will become more and more normal. Knock on wood. But yeah, I think it's possible. There just has to be a will for it to happen. And we have to think beyond the almighty dollar and just the bottom line and think more about what kind of world do we want to live in and have enough. And so that's my thing. I would love to see it happen. Yeah,
that would be awesome. So on the topic of childcare, what fictional character would you let babysit your kids?
Brooke?
I thought about this a lot because I have a few different ones. I think maybe Jess from New Girl. She's so fun and she's a teacher and I feel that she's trustworthy and sweet, but would also clean up the house when the kids took a nap. And so I thought she would be really great. But I also feel that Leslie Knope would be a great choice because I know she's not letting the kids get away with anything.
Leslie Knope from Parks and Recreation,
yes,
right?
Yeah, she is keeping, she's keeping the house clean. She's keeping the kids on track, not letting them get away with any goofy business. So, yeah, either one of them.
And they're going to be civil servants, and they're going to have responsibility with Leslie, right?
Yes.
For me, my mind goes to a couple places. One, my favorite show of all time is The West Wing, and so the chief of staff to the Bartlett presidency is Leo McGarry, who's loyal and protective of his best friend, the president. And so I would trust him, but he does, spoiler alert, have a heart attack in the later season, so he's not as spry as he used to be. So it depends. I think he would run our boys would run circles around him. Yeah. But I've also rewatching the show from 2004 to 2010, Lost, with my wife right now, and John Locke is a character on there who's weird, strange for sure, but he is going to take care of anybody in front of him and be responsible, and I love that about that character. So I would say if there was a wild boar chasing our kids, I'd want John Locke to be there for sure. If people were attacking my kids through social media or something like that, I'd want Leo McGarry to be in my corner because he's a faithful friend in that way. That's me.
So I don't have kids, but I think my first reaction is the one babysitter I could think of in a movie was the babysitter from Incredibles.
You actually went to a real babysitter in
Yeah,
a movie.
yeah.
Okay.
That was like who I kept thinking of, but I was like, well, I mean, the kids like blow up the house at one point, I think. But also, if she can handle like superhero kids, I hope when I do have kids, they're like normal. And so I feel like she could handle those.
Yes.
But yeah, that was the one I thought of because, I mean, she also has the house put back together by the time the parents get home. So
Oh, man, that's worth so much.
Yeah.
Right there. That's an amazing gift. Yeah.
Yep. And so that's who I would go with.
All right.
Our last topic today is a Relevant magazine article titled, "Why Do People Get So Mad When Their Political Party is Criticized?" Why are so many people triggered when their political party or leader is criticized? Pastor Rich Viotis, the author of the article, asks. Enmeshment is our tendency to fuse with others in such a way that it becomes hard to determine where one person ends and another begins. We see it in the world of politics. In an ever-increasing way, people are so enmeshed with political figures and parties that it's hard to distinguish themselves from it. This reality is especially revealed when criticism surfaces. For people of faith, this is the ancient call to reject idolatry. Idolatry is the unquestioned allegiance one gives to something or someone other than God. This rejection is not just practiced through theological commitment, but by emotional clarity. When the candidate you support is criticized and you feel deep anger and defensiveness, the question we need to ask is, why am I so defensive? Have I confused my core identity with the person or party I support? The painful truth of this is, if a political leader is beyond genuine critique in your mind, the political leader has taken on a godlike status. I really liked this article. There's a lot more to it. Yeah, I definitely encourage you to read it in the show notes. So what do you think about the author saying that we get offended because we've idolized these politicians?
I think he's right on. I think it's something we don't think about is like idol worship or really making an idol out of things. But to his point, if that person is beyond critique and we feel personally attacked when somebody attacks them, we are putting them on a pedestal. We're putting them above other things. And so, yeah, I think that we totally idolize people or political tribes. He also talks so much in the article about how we enmesh or we sort of mold with these people. And I think it's really it's a sign of where we find our core identity. We're starting to see ourselves as part of that movement. And therefore, if that movement or that leader is critiqued or criticized or made fun of, then we feel critiqued, made fun of, criticized. And that is a dangerous place to be. That's why one of the most powerful calls in the scriptures and Christian theology is understanding that we are made in the image of God and that our first name, our most important name, is that we're his beloved, not what we do, not what we don't do, not the good we do or the bad we do, all that stuff. But it's that we are loved first, and God says that we're enough and we're his. We get it so mixed up every 4 years as these things turn around because we get so tangled in a team where we find like this is our tribe. And when we do that, man, it leads to a huge mess. I heard another Christian leader say a couple weeks ago, this brought a lot of clarity to me, is that, the church, the people of God are not called to be cheerleaders for Republicans or Democrats, but we're called to be referees for all, to call balls and strikes, to be umps, to be truth tellers in the midst of it, and know that one leader is not going to fix everything and one leader is not going to break everything. Let me say that again because I need to hear that personally. Yeah. One leader is not going to fix everything and one leader is not going to break everything beyond repair. That doesn't mean that who you vote for doesn't matter. It doesn't mean that you can't have strong convictions about who you vote for. But we need to have the clarity to be like, oh, even the person we liked, that's bad. Or, oh, I can't line up with that. And there's not going to be a candidate that honestly should line up with everything that you believe, I believe, or the way of Jesus. Like there's just not. God does not fit into those nice little categories. But man, this is such a challenging thing because I can get my identity wrapped up in one political worldview or the other political worldview being evil. And in the context of that, I get too enmeshed, as Rich Viotis says. And so I think it's such a great challenge that no matter who wins the White House, Jesus is king. Yeah. And that's the thing to remember and to be truth tellers to whatever side it is and not get enmeshed. This is interesting. We're recording this on the day of the very first presidential debate between Kamala Harris and Donald Trump. So you better believe I'll be watching that debate, and I'm gonna be thinking a lot about it. But I hope that this would be a year that Jesus followers, we don't get too tribal with one side, and we don't take it so personally for us, like we're being critiqued or we're being attacked. But I think it's so easy to do that, and I see that pull in myself, not just in other people. But I think Rich Viodas, he's awesome. This is a great article. He has a lot to say. That's really good.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I don't know. The thing that I kind of push back on in this article, I think it's almost human nature to have these reactions when something that something you like is criticized. Mm-hmm. Because, like, I don't know, like, if someone says, you know, this movie that you really like or this show you really like is stupid, I don't like it, it almost hurts me, because I'm like, well, I feel like that's because I enjoy this so much, it's almost part of my identity. And maybe that's another thing that I need to work on. But also, I feel like it's such human nature to be upset when someone criticizes something that you agree with or something that you like. And so, I don't know.
No, I get what you're saying, and I agree with that. I just think that there can be degrees and levels to this thing.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
To where if you're like, oh, I'm watching Lost, and you're like, oh, that's the dumbest show that was ever made, I'll be like, well, you're wrong, you don't get it, and I could let that roll off, or I could be laying in bed at 2:00 in the morning, feeling like you're attacking me, you don't respect me, and all this different kind of things. So, to me, I think there's levels to this thing. Now, like in the political spectrum, like if somebody was attacking the candidate that you were supporting and being like, oh, that's stupid, you can be like, okay, whatever, I don't really respect what you think about this, or we're not going to see this eye to eye. Or you can feel like you got to defend that person and attack back and get into this kind of like brawl that doesn't change anybody's mind,
right?
And ultimately doesn't make anybody feel better. So I would just say, yes, like it's very human nature to be like, to feel that, but to what degree are you letting it like own your next 6 hours or your attitude towards them the next time you see them too? And because there's this levels to that will not lead you to be healthy, and you're stewing over something that they've long forgotten about. And that's what I think I would like to guard against in myself, and encourage other people to guard against is we want people to like us and like the things that we like, right? But if they don't, it's not like they're my enemy, they're just wrong.
How do you think we can stop ourselves from becoming enmeshed with political figures before we get to the point of, you know, telling someone they're an idiot because they don't agree with us?
Yeah. For me, I think like we have a tendency in the American story to idealize people. Like, it's an interesting thing because even all the way back in the Hebrew scriptures, before Saul was called the first king of Israel, God didn't set up this country, Israel, to have a king, but God's people wanted a king. They wanted that one leader. They wanted someone to represent them, because all the other nations had kings that were like these rock star leaders. And I think there's a human desire in us, as we just go by our little lives, to have that inspirational, idealized, like George Washington, Abraham Lincoln, Martin Luther King Jr., these incredible leaders. I know he wasn't a president, please don't write me later. But we want these like incredible leaders to represent us, and we're like behind them. And I think when we do that with movies, and it's just sort of what we do as humans. But when we do that in the real world, we make people very black and white, and there needs to be a hero and there needs to be a villain, and there's no nuance or mess to them. So I like to think, like I said earlier, that like no one's going to destroy the whole thing, and no one's going to save everything. I don't want to make them like the hero. And remember that like Jesus had the opportunity to come in the political world and be a political leader, and he chose the exact opposite every way, and he changed the world. So that's how I want to see the world change. I think that's how God is changing the world, is not from the top down, but the bottom up. So I want to remind myself that like, it's not really the thing that's going to change everything.
I feel like this is so hard because I am just someone who, I know politics are important, and I vote, and I believe in the ways that I believe, but I just have never been one to get extremely caught up in one party or the other. I can see a lot of things on both sides. I agree and disagree with many things on each side. But I've just never been one to unfriend somebody because of the way that they vote or the way that they think. So this was interesting to me. I think also it's important for people, myself included, to recognize when somebody thinks differently than you or votes differently than you, to consider their background and the way they were raised and the life that they live. Because the way I see something might be because of a way I was brought up or a way that I am privileged to live that maybe somebody else just didn't have the same experiences or the same privileges that I do. And so that's something that I try to think about when somebody is disagreeing with me, especially when it comes to politics.
I love that. That's good. Well, that's it for this episode of Atypical Talk. If you have any questions or topics you'd like us to talk about, you can email those to atypicaltalkpod@gmail.com. Make sure to follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok at Atypical Talk Pod, and subscribe on your favorite podcast platform to get updates when new episodes go live. We hope that these conversations today have helped you think wider, love deeper, and partner with God to bring the up there down here in your everyday life. Thanks for listening.